set him up and nail him with the uppercut. There's the right hand again. Watch for the uppercut. Softens him up with the hook. The uppercut again. And down goes Ratliff for the second time. It's all over. Mike Tyson knocks out Alfonso Ratliff in the second round.
Tyson comes out slugging.
He comes out smoking like Marvis's father, Joe. Marvis must move or we're going to be out of here very, very quickly. Uppercut, and Marvis is hurt.
Razor is down. Joe Cortez moves in to have a look, and he's going to stop the fight. It did not last 20 seconds.
Tyson still has to be careful because that shot, that's
Huge
it.
right hand.
That should be it.
And down goes Holmes, and that's going to be it. It's over. That's all.
Rolling willingly just to try to get in the shot that will finish things in his
The
favor.
uppercut.
What an uppercut by Douglas, and down goes Tyson.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
It's over.
It's over.
Mike Tyson has been knocked out.
I think his problems began with violence on the streets. And through violence, he found power because he's always a victim in his own mind. And it was very clear from the very beginning that Robin was out for a husband with a lot of money, someone who could advance her own career. The jury therefore decided that they don't like this guy. He must have felt like he was more alone then than any other time in his entire life.
I'm Jay Nickerson, and welcome to Mike Tyson, Fallen Warrior. The heavyweight division is now in an utter state of turmoil after losing one of its greatest warriors to a courtroom in Indianapolis. We'll find out what drove Mike Tyson into the situation he finds himself in today. Many people have varied opinions on what led to the downfall of Mike Tyson, but one thing is certain. It started at an early age.
Well, his problems certainly began in Brownsville, in New York, where he was born and spent his life up to around 12 years old. And it was a situation where it was an unwed mother and a father whose name was Kirkpatrick, of all names, interesting, was never there and fathered 23 other children to various women. And Mike deeply hated and resented his father. There's one point in the book where I talk about how Mike and his two older siblings, a brother and a sister, ran into the father on the street in Brownsville. And the father gave $1 to each of them. And his older brother took the dollar and pocketed it. The sister pocketed hers, and Mike threw his on the ground and spit on it. And this is at 6, 7, 8 years old. His mother was in and out of work, eventually got into a kind of a welfare cycle, and drank a lot. And there was a lot of violence in the home with her boyfriend, throwing boiling water on each other and things like this. And so I think Mike was pushed more and more onto the streets and life on the streets because the home situation was so horrible. And in addition to that, there was often no heat in the house, in the apartment. Oddly enough, when he was in the house, he spent a lot of his time in a fantasy world, watching cartoons, which is a theme that persists throughout his life. Now he watches, videotapes endlessly, hours and hours of videotapes of kung fu movies and things like that. But I think his problems began with violence on the streets, and through violence. Or let's call it sort of public enemy behavior, gangster behavior on the streets, he found power, which is a very compelling thing for a kid in his position because he's always a victim in his own mind. He's a victim to his family situation. He always gets the short end of the deal. You know, he's the youngest, so he's the weakest in the family and gets the last bit of food. And very often dinner for that family was flour and water, and making a paste out of that and cooking that in like pancakes and things like that. And so I think as Mike found his physical power, which didn't take long because he was always bigger than the other kids, he began to use that and use violence to find not so much justice, but to find some sort of control over his life. And so in the book, there's a constant theme. There's the one hand the theme of Mike using violence as a form of empowerment, personal empowerment. And then there's a theme of Mike and his humanity wanting to come forward. In other words, he didn't want to be violent. He wanted to be reformed. And so this is just the one of many contradictions that sort of become the engines driving him forward throughout his bizarre life. And of course, it's one of the engines that ultimately drove him to a conviction for rape.
You know, Mike was a street kid. He's a kid who came out of the ghetto. You know, he came from the dark side of life, if you know what I'm saying. You know, living in the ghetto. No one really knows what went on. He was being locked up for, you know, petty crimes. But you know, that makes you grow up a lot quicker.
Mike Tyson was a street kid with unbridled anger. He used that anger in unproductive ways in his younger years, as we've seen. But the one ingredient that Mike was lacking was direction in his life. And the man to give this to Mike was Cus D'Amato.
When you're around Cus D'Amato from day one, he teaches you about life. So it's not a separate thing where Cus taught Mike about fighting, becoming the greatest fighter ever, and now becomes course B. Now we're going to teach you, you know, how to be a human being. It's not like that. You know, with Cus, you're learning as you go along. You learn how to be a fighter, how to be a good person. So Tyson was being taught as he went along. It wasn't until Robin got involved in his life and screwed his head all up, and then Don King came in.
The urge in Mike to become more human was perverted by these people. So he was, and Cus D'Amato was the first to do that. Now, I know this makes Mike seem like some sort of endless victim. And in a sense, he is, because you can never forget that Cus was at that point a 69, 68-year-old man. Mike was a 12-year-old boy. Now, he had street smarts, but he didn't have the wisdom and the powers of emotional manipulation of a 69-year-old man who had a long history in boxing and in the politics of boxing, emotional and otherwise. So this is the first person who recognized Mike's ability to become the heavyweight champion and exploited that for his own personal gain. In the process, he did things for Mike to help his, you know, the urge to be more human. He tried to straighten Mike out. But there's one thing he didn't do, and it turned out to be the sort of the rot in the center of the whole plan to make Mike the heavyweight champion of the world. And that is when Mike demonstrated a problem with women. In other words, using violence against women to get what he wanted from them, or violence against them when they wouldn't give him what he wanted. Cus ignored that. And that's, in other words, he said, don't worry, Mike. I'll solve that problem for you. You don't have to solve it.
I always thought that we had like a family bond through Cus, you know, because Cus brought me into the house, and he helped me, you know, straighten me, helped me become a better fighter, a better person, you know, tricked me into going back to school, and I mean, it all worked out for me. Then he started breaking me in as a trainer, and then he left me, you know, with the reins to complete the job that Cus D'Amato started. And you know, Mike always, you know, respected me, and I liked Mike, and you know, we had a good working relationship. You know, the gym was business, and we never had any problems. Only when he finally married Robin, that's when he just a little here and there.
Mike Tyson came along almost as an incident relative to the fact that Jim and I had been supporting the camp of Cus D'Amato. Jim and Cus were very close. And when Jim left New York and moved up to Catskill, he set up a camp for disadvantaged kids. And we supported the camp. This started in 1970, so it was long before we even dreamed there'd be a Mike Tyson. And there were many disadvantaged kids, and we continued to support the camp when suddenly, out of the clear blue, in 1980, there was a Mike Tyson. And Cus was very high on Mike, and whatever Cus wanted from Mike, we gave him, regardless of what the costs were. All equipment, training, sparring, trips to all of the fights. as a participant, most fighters who go to various tournaments get one ticket. In the case of Mike, even though he'd get the one ticket, we would send him for every tournament. From the time he entered the first tournament, he was sent originally with Teddy Atlas and Cuss, and when Teddy Atlas broke off with Kevin Rooney and Cuss. And we bought Cuss didn't fly, so we bought him a roomette on the train. So whether it was Colorado Springs or Los Angeles or Florida, wherever the tournament was, it was always Kevin and Mike together and Cuss frequently. And we picked up the expenses, running it to many hundreds of thousands of dollars for that.
He wanted to fulfill Cuss's prophecy, and so did I. And, you know, Jacobs and Caton followed, you know, strict orders by Cuss from you know, the hospital bed. You know, Jimmy used to go in and have conversations. When Jimmy told me this himself, and he said he followed everything that Cuss said. Cuss said do certain things, fight him often. At a certain point, you know, look for an opportunity. And you know, that's what they did. So, but you know, there was no big change in Mike.
Mike missed Cuss, but Mike went on to continue to improve as a fighter. You know, in deference to Cuss, even though Cuss had died, and even though he was very sad about it, Cuss had instilled professionalism into Mike. And just 9 days after the death of Cuss, Mike went to Texas to fight Richardson and knocked him out in 1 round or so. So no, Mike continued to fight very well. I feel that the key to Mike's success in the ring was, of course, the enormous talents that Mike brought to the ring, and, of course, the teaching and training of Cus D'Amato, the greatest teacher in training, in my judgment, in boxing history.
Mike Tyson was the youngest heavyweight ever to win the title. From the very beginning, he kept a ring demeanor of a raging bull. He wanted to get in and out of the ring as quickly as possible. His goal was to beat his opponent and make him never want to fight Tyson again. But not everyone labeled him a champion from the very beginning.
Mike Tyson came onto the boxing scene an unknown. He was a troubled kid with a serious mean streak in him. He did have one thing going for him, and that was the direction of legendary boxing guru Cus D'Amato. Tyson's early career was more than hectic. He crowded 28 fights into less than 2 years of pro competition. At first, he was known as a powerful puncher who could not compete with the other giants in the heavyweight division. He was an undisciplined young fighter exuding raw power. This power was brought to the forefront by Cus D'Amato as he taught Tyson how to land what he called hydrogen bombs, with pinpoint accuracy to the head of many opposing fighters. The result was a series of early round knockouts.
Mike Tyson, a fine amateur, though. He only had 17 fights, 15 and 2. His only 2 losses. Oh, good right hand. Down goes Spain. Well,
Right hand is a strong one from Mike Tyson. I asked him what he felt his best punch was, and he said whatever hits him, and his right hand got Spain in a lot of trouble. And now Joe O'Neill is going to make the decision if he's going to let Spain continue. And here comes Tyson again. He got him with the left hand, and he's out of here.
Kennedy, little shaky now, takes a right hand. This one could end in a hurry. Kennedy in serious trouble. Now, this is the prototype of Mike Tyson's fights. He comes right at you, and boy, he is blazing when he comes out. Intimidating. When you see big Mike Tyson come for you, you better head in the other direction in a hurry. Right hand glances off the chin, but it rocked Kennedy. The left hook does it the same. Kennedy's hands are really very low, and Tyson, boy, you have to like how poised he is right here. He is picking his shots well. He is hurting. This one could be over. It is.
Round number 1 scheduled 6, but hold on to your hats. Nobody thinks it's going to go that far. Well, up there he goes. He's just going to pull his way in. Those rights to the body. Left jab, right to the heart.
Quickly want to point out, first fight for Michael Jack Johnson in 2 years.
I'm glad you pointed it out, because down he goes. The left hook just buried him, dug him in the ribs.
I think it was a
Michael
left and a right.
Johnson went goodbye. That left hook just caught him and sent him right to the canvas.
23-pound weight advantage, and he put it all there.
The right to the head, and it's all over. Here comes Tyson. Left hand again.
Well, he nearly sent Long out of the ring with that left hook.
Tyson, oh, Long is down, second time. Another knockdown.
There is no 3 knockdown after 3 if he decides so. This is very impressive. Mike Tyson not expected to come out this strong against Long.
5 of 8 have fallen in the first. Is it 6 of 9 as Tyson comes out with a strong right-hand barrage again?
This is as bad as I've ever seen Donnie Long look, but give Tyson credit. That's it. Wow.
The left hand puts him down.
Amato, of course.
Right hand by Tyson.
Oh, my. First punch he threw.
What took him so long?
I'll tell you what.
Well, he has a 19 3/4-inch neck, which is approximately the size of actress Shelley Duvall's waist.
And you certainly see the punching power in Tyson.
One of the real rising stars in the boxing galaxy today, Mike Tyson, a fellow for whom everybody predicts a great future. If they can find some fights, then...
That left hand almost drove Richardson right through the canvas.
He might have broken his nose already.
That's right. It looks bad.
Scaff is on the run. Blood just pouring down from the nose of Sammy Scaff.
Tyson does not throw wild punches, Sam.
Big left hook. And there is Scaff down.
3, 4.
The count is 5.
For the rest of the year.
6.
The count is 7. This one's over.
He's a young, strong guy. He jumps right on his opponents. And I think this might be another early stoppage because this guy's been a little wild. He's going to get caught with something.
Mark Young out of Charlotte, North Carolina, comes out swinging.
That jab pushed him back. Oh, this guy is like a ball of granite.
Awesome is an overused word in the 1980s, but Mike Tyson is absolutely awesome. Just sit back and watch, but don't blink because you could miss it. A low right from Young. And down goes Mark Young. Mike Tyson, Sports Illustrated cover boy, trying to end it here in round number 5.
Jamison is doing at this point what I think he should have been doing from the first book. He just took a right hand to the top of the head. And the 3 knockdown rule is in effect. Tyson comes out slugging.
He comes out smoking like Marvis's father, Joe. Marvis must move or we're going to be out of here very, very quickly. Uppercut, and Marvis is hurt.
Razor is down. Joe Cortez moves in to have a look. And he's going to stop the fight. It did not last 20 seconds.
Tyson will move in for the kill. He'll set him up and nail him with the uppercut. There's the right hand again. Watch for the uppercut. Softens him up with the hook. The uppercut again. And down goes Ratliff for the second time. It's all over. Mike Tyson knocks out Alfonso Ratliff in the second round.
A right to the body and an uppercut to the head, and Burbick is down. This one is going to be over, I believe. And a left hand, and that staggered Thomas. And a right hand behind it. Thomas in trouble again. And now Tyson moves in for the kill. 2 uppercuts and a left hand. Thomas trying to hold on. Serious trouble, and down he goes.
Oh, this is it.
He is gone right now. He has no legs at all. And 10 seconds to go in a round. There's a left hand. He's down again. It's over. It's all over. And it wasn't even close. 30 seconds left in the round. Both fighters have had their say here.
I couldn't tell whether or not the punch hurt.
Tubbs is hurt. Tubbs is hurt badly. It was a left hook.
Tyson still has to be careful because Larry... Oh, that shot. That's
Huge
it.
right hand.
That should be it.
And down goes Holmes, and that's going to be it. It's over. That's all.
Tyson ripped through all the heavyweight contenders. bringing his record to 37-0 with 33 knockouts. Only the great Rocky Marciano retired an undefeated heavyweight champion, racking up 49 consecutive wins in the process. Boxing experts began the comparisons and the questions of whether the 23-year-old Tyson could achieve this amazing feat. During this streak, Tyson became the first undisputed heavyweight champion since Muhammad Ali. Tyson and Ali had one similarity that physical ability had nothing to do with. They were both masters at intimidation. Ali with his flamboyant, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, and Tyson with his Terminator-type aura, wearing no socks and only black trunks into the ring. In fact, Tyson was fined $3,000 for wearing the same black trunks as Trevor Berbick in their 1986 championship fight. Berbick, being the champion at the time, had also chosen black trunks for psychological reasons. Tyson appeared to be a brick wall that would not fall. But that theory was proved wrong one fateful day in 1990 in Tokyo, Japan, when Tyson went up against James Buster Douglas.
It appears that Tyson is virtually a one-eyed fighter at this point.
A desperate one-eyed fighter. Rolling willingly just to try to get in the shot that will finish things in.
Oh, the uppercut.
What an uppercut by Douglas, and down goes Tyson.
It's over. It's over.
Mike Tyson has been knocked out.
Oh, he didn't train. He didn't train for weeks before the fight, and then I think it was 2 weeks before the fight, he accelerated his workout so he could take off 20 pounds or whatever it was, and because I remember the fight and I watched him when he was coming into the ring, and I said something ain't right here. I could just see the look in his eye, and what happened was, see, and Cuss always spoke about this. So, a lot of fighters, most fighters, if they don't train, it's going to bother them. Like if they don't stay to their routine, wherever it is, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, run exactly 2.3 miles, not a tenth over, not a tenth, you know, eat the certain eggs at the certain time. There's a certain routine. Now, if the fighter doesn't follow that certain routine, when he steps in the ring, his mind starts to play tricks on him, and something will start to bother him, and he'll start to look for the excuse why he's going to lose. So what happened with Mike was he knew he wasn't in any type of shape. Now what he should have done, the bell should have rang. He should have ran out of the corner and just started throwing haymakers and throw as many as he can for as long as he can. 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 4 rounds, whatever. He would have won. But what he did, he was scared. So he came out there. He knows he didn't train. So he said, all right, well, maybe this guy will fall down because he's afraid of me. Now Buster Douglas, who was in good shape, who was a scared fighter, he came out very cautious, you know, waiting for the bomb to explode. So he started throwing a couple of punches, and he started landing. So after 1-2 rounds, you know, he was a scared. What happened was a scared fighter turned brave. Now once you get a scared fighter turned brave, you got a problem.
The loss was devastating, but Tyson regrouped and staged a comeback. The old unbeatable Tyson came back with 2 convincing victories over contender Razor Ruddock.
His boxing ability is not there. He have a lot of raw power. He's strong and he can punch, and he don't have any intention of going the distance.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I take it all with a grain of salt. You know what I mean? Only thing I take serious is what you can prove in the ring. But I'm sure one thing, he's gonna have a big surprise.
Tyson doesn't believe it himself, saying it's gonna be a heated fight. The reason why is that he switched back and forth when he wants. So he said, oh, it's going to be a tough fight then. But you see, you have to build up his confidence. You have to say it to himself. You have to say it over and over that it's not going to be a tough fight. It's not going to be as tough as people say it is. But deep down inside, he knows it's going to be hell.
You know, because I'm not, what do you call, like a book technique fighter. And I just say, well, if he does this, you do. I just fight. You know what I mean, and expect, you know what I mean, anticipate things. I don't say, well, but always look, I won't be watching out for his left hand all the time. I won't be, you know, I'm just not that kind of guy. I'm just from the whole barometer of the situation. I used to look and I used to fight.
I'm not saying that he can't defend it. I'm saying I don't think he will defend it. He'd probably try and defend it. I don't know how he would do it. I mean, if I did know how to do it, I wouldn't tell him either.
It's really a battle of wills and skills. You know, it's who wants to fight the most, unless the guy is just so 100 million times so superiorly over-skilled, you know what I mean? Other than that, you're just two fighters fighting who wants it the most. And if neither fighter quits, it's just going to be an interesting fight.
Tyson would prove that he was back for good by following the first fight knockout of Ruddock with a winning decision in the second fight. Tyson then got an opportunity at what many people were calling the fight of the century. He was set to take on Evander Holyfield to regain the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. As it turned out, a freak injury put a delay to the fight, and the indictment of Tyson put an end to it.
There are numerous variables that led to the conviction of Mike Tyson. Some people would say that you can take the kid off the streets, but you can't take the streets out of the kid. But most boxing experts will tell you that Don King was the worst influence in the life of Mike Tyson.
Don King is the promoter of Mike Tyson. He and Donald Trump arrived on the Tyson scene at the same time. King attached himself to Tyson, convincing him that he needed more of a black influence in his camp. From the very beginning, they both had a lot in common. Tyson growing up in the ghetto in Brooklyn and involved in petty crime, and King growing up in the ghettos of Cleveland in the 30s. Tyson had spent time in a number of institutions, and King had spent time in prison for running a numbers racket. When King set his sights on Tyson, he had plenty of bargaining power. He was the first to develop an undefeated heavyweight champion from amateur to pro in Larry Holmes. He would make Holmes one of the richest athletes in history. He received more than $3 million for the tape delay broadcast of Holmes versus Jerry Cooney. He also established the first $6 million live gate with The Last Hurrah, the Ali-Holmes matchup in 1980. King's exploits were not limited to the heavyweight division. He negotiated the first $10 million purse for a fighter when Sugar Ray Leonard took on Roberto Duran, also in 1980. With these lists of accomplishments, Tyson must have thought that he was in capable hands. After the fact, he may want to reconsider his decision. Tyson now claims that he is close to losing every dollar of his amassed millions. King may have to take responsibility for much of the losses, as King's former chief financial officer has released some staggering figures. King has been accused of paying his daughter Debbie over $50,000 a year to be president of the Mike Tyson fan club, and $15,000 to her husband as a Tyson consultant. He was also accused of billing Tyson over $100,000 for renovations on his own home. Others question whether King was sincere about Tyson's best interest. Mike himself admits that he had to tell King to set up the fight with Holyfield, or it would never have happened. Those close to Tyson claim that King may have added to Tyson's violent behavior outside the ring, claiming that King was always urging Tyson to prove that he was his own man, prove that he was his own black man who should be respected. Thus the question arises, was Mike's behavior a result of trying to prove something to Don King? Only Mike Tyson himself knows for sure.
Why wouldn't Mike go with Don King? The guy, you saw him, he was there before we got in the tournament. You know he's the thief. I mean, Tyson come out and said to himself, well, when you have a snake, you put lights on it, you can watch the snake. So it was Mike's ego thinking, well, he can out-hustle probably the greatest hustler that boxing's ever produced is Don King. I mean, I got to give, I'll give him his due. He's a great hustler. He's very smart, and he made a ton of money. And he robbed a lot of money. And that's how he made his money, you know what I mean? And the big shots, Trump, Seth Abrahams, the network people, they turn away from him. They know the man's a thief. They know he stole every fight he ever had, but they don't care. See, Seth Abrahams doesn't care. As long as people are turning on the television set to watch HBO, that's all he's interested in. That's that number. Trump, Gianfranco, Steve Wynn, them guys don't care. All they care about is the seats. People coming to the casinos to sit down and spend money gambling and drinking and watching the fight. They don't care that they got to go to a thief who robbed every fighter he ever had, robbed the fighters from other people, robbed the fighters of their own money. They don't care as long as King and he strikes a deal with them, he delivers.
1986, Don King tells Butch Lewis, when they're the dynamic duo promoting the heavyweight championship or the HBO heavyweight unification series, he says to Butch Lewis, let's steal Mike Tyson away. Butch Lewis said, I don't want any part of that. Don King never gave up on the plan. In 1987, he gives a young man that knew Mike in Albany named John Horn money to follow Mike around every time he comes to Los Angeles. John Horn had moved to Los Angeles and was a struggling actor. I think he wanted to be a stand-up comic, something like that. Mike said to a friend of his, Tom Patty, who also lived in L.A. and lived in the house with him in Catskill when they were boys, I never know how it is that John Horn knows when to find me when I'm in town, but he's always there. Can always depend on that. He was on King's payroll. Of course, now John Horn is Mike's probably his closest aide within the camp. That was step 2 in King's plan. Step 3 was the moment Jimmy Jacobs died. King knew that Bill Caton wasn't a big enough ego to deal with Tyson, and that he could fill a vacuum in Tyson's life. And King, of course, did that. And he stayed with Tyson as closely as he could throughout the marriage, and when the women left, King took Tyson in.
King goes around saying, Mike always ran after me. I didn't go after Mike. He pursued Mike that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday like you can't imagine. He went out to Bernardsville. He chased everybody. He was like he sought him out. He finally got to him at a rap concert Wednesday night. He used the most blatantly racist pitch. And he's very, very effective. No matter what you say about Don King, he is a brilliant con artist, maybe one of the greatest con artists of all time. He can convince almost anybody of anything. And he's quite successful, even with very sophisticated, knowledgeable people. He's succeeded in having his way. And he convinced Mike that his future lay with King, and even though it took a period of time, he got Mike. And that was the worst thing that happened to Mike. I never wanted to settle with King and haven't settled with King simply because up to the termination of my contract, I felt that there was a good chance that Mike would finally see the light and realize that King was ripping him off, was an absolute disaster for him, both in and out of the ring, and at least come back to Kevin, who King got him to fire, and to Steve Lott. But he did not do it, and as of this period, as you could see, it's all come home to roost.
And the betrayal that Don committed on Mike was to create for him a sense that he was his own man, that he's a black man, that he can do what he wants, and that everyone else who was involved in his life, all the white people, were emasculating him. Now, there's, Don mixes truth with the lies, and that's why he's so persuasive and a compelling figure. Yeah, the white people in Mike's life were emasculating him. They were lying to him. They were denying all of his racial identity. There was not a black face in the camp. But Don was not letting Mike be a real man. What he was doing was letting Mike be a boy with the aura of a black man's pride.
We learned from Cuss. See, Cuss, there wasn't really no color with Cuss. You were black, white, brown, blue, red. If you were honest and you wanted to learn how to box and be a good person, Cuss would take you in. So Mike learned from Cuss. I learned from Cuss. It had nothing to do with not having a black person in the camp. That's just Don King's racist con. He cons the black fighters into trusting the black man, him, this big guy, and then he robs their money. I mean, it's a great con. It's a great con. That's all that is.
I think Don King is the black eye. There's nothing in boxing comparable to Don King and firm in terms of destroying the image of boxing. If you speak to any of the network executives, any of them, they will all tell you that the reason that sponsors aren't picking up boxing is not because boxing doesn't produce. On a cost per thousand, boxing does a hell of a lot better than tennis, golf, gymnastics, many of the other sports. But the image of boxing is one that sponsors do not want any part of. And that image is Don King. If Don King is out of boxing, boxing will hugely benefit.
Yeah, he should get away from Don King. I mean, that's what he should do. He should get, King didn't make him. King never helped him. King's only got him in trouble. That's, Mike, you've only gotten in trouble with King. You ought to get rid of King and then maybe be able to salvage your life.
Tyson would never be labeled as a squeaky clean individual. From day one, he was involved in more trouble than he needed. But his interest in boxing and his goal of becoming the next heavyweight champ of the world seemed to curb his tendency to find trouble. That is, until his not-so-healthy relationship with an upcoming actress by the name of Robin Givens.
Well, the Givens story has to begin again in a lie. On February 7th, her mother, Ruth Roper, called Jimmy. Ruth Roper was in Chicago. Jimmy was here in New York, and she said, my daughter, Robin Givens, and your fighter are here in Chicago, and if you don't agree to their being married right now in Chicago, Mike is not coming back to New York. I will take them to Las Vegas. In addition to that, Mr. Jacobs, my daughter's 3 months pregnant. Well, Jimmy went ballistic. So he was against the wall. He had no choice. He had to agree to their being married that time. Well, they were married and they came back to New York. Well, of course, Robin was not pregnant. Her own mother, Ruth Roper, had used the same ruse to marry Reuben Givens when she was in high school. And it was very clear from the very beginning, which was when Mike and Robin first met in early '87, that Robin was out for a husband with a lot of money and someone who could advance her own career. It was like a plan. And her mother was the key person in all the planning. Well, when they were married, the mother, however, and Robin did see that these contracts that Mike signed on February 12th were born in fraud, and you have to give them credit for wanting to right that wrong. However, they only wanted to right it so they could benefit, not Mike. And what they tried to do in the early months of the marriage was wrest control over Mike's finances and his management of his career from Bill Caton. So when Mike was in Los Angeles at Jimmy Jacobs' funeral in March, Robin and Givens and her mother were at the Merrill Lynch offices in the Pan Am building in Midtown, demanding that they transfer all of his bank accounts there from Mike's name to joint accounts so Robin could have check signing privileges. That same day, they went out to New Jersey to buy a $6 or $7 million mansion in Bernardsville. They were shopping for a house, and they wanted to pay all cash, all of Mike's cash, no mortgage. The plan, however, all backfired because Trump came into the picture. And Robin and Ruth brought him into the picture because they needed an ally in this whole plan to fight against Don King, who was swarming around, and Bill Caton. But Trump knew that 2 women could not control Mike Tyson or manage his career. So Trump basically conspired to have Tyson settle with Caton on this contract dispute and continue to fight with him, with Caton. And at that point, the women realized that that part of the plan wasn't going to work. They couldn't control Mike's career. They could spend his money, however, and they continued to do that.
Mike and I had a very warm, cordial relationship until his marriage. In fact, the last really nice session I had with Mike prior to his marriage was in my office for over an hour when we talked about the fight that I was setting up for Japan. This was following the Holmes fight. And one of the things he was interested in and joked about was the fact that he was going with 3 girls at the same time. One was Robin, one was this Williams, this Miss America, third was this very gorgeous model. And Jim and I separated the 3 women into 3 different sections. Each got first or second row seats, but in 3 different sections to make sure there'd be no hair pulling between the 3 of them. But Mike joked about that, but listened attentively when I explained how the deal was being set up with Japan, how I tied in Nippon TV with the Karakuan people who owned the arena and the Dentsu advertising agency, and he asked the right questions. He was on his way, I believe, at that time to becoming an astute businessman. I really believe that. He was not mathematically good, but he had good street smarts. But the last thing he said as he left my office that time was that he was going to California. And I said, to see Robin? He says, well, I really like the scene. A week later, we got a call from Robin's mother, who called Jim, who came running up the stairs to tell me that he had got a call from Ruth Roper that Robin was pregnant and that Mike was on his way to Chicago to have his, quote, wedding blessed by Father Clement. But since that was not a legal wedding in any sense, he would have to come to New York to be married. Or else she'd bring him to Reno to be married. Well, if Mike wanted to get married, he was perfectly okay with us. In fact, even though both Robin and all the people around Robin were saying I was against the marriage, I was very much for it. The Spinks fight was coming up, and there was nothing more important to me than that Mike be happy, and keeping happy with a wife was much better than running around, so I was very pleased with it. But Robin had her own plan, and of course, as soon as she got married to him, Don King moved in on Ruth Roper, the mother, and Robin, And the three of them immediately conspired, put their heads together on how to break Mike away from me. And because of Robin, initially, they had the power to do it. It was hard for me to compete with the wife.
I don't want to say nothing bad, negative about them, because you know that was Mike's wife. So I just made some comment that, well, you know, I don't really know Ruth, but I know she loves her kids, so she can't be all bad, because, you know, I love my kids. I was just looking for a branch to stick out there. I mean, how I really feel about them is they're evil people. You know, Ruth and Robin, they're both evil.
What they said about doing was assassinating his character to create the foundation for a divorce action based on mental cruelty and physical abuse. And so they began to spread rumors throughout the New York boxing media, Mike McAlery being the one they used very, very fruitfully, who is, of course, now a big columnist here, but he really made his career on the information they were feeding him, that Mike was suicidal, that he was beating them, and so on and so forth. And McAlery published this very faithfully. Now, I'm not saying he knew they were falsehoods and he published them knowing they were falsehoods, but he was not very questioning about the objectivity of his sources. He just seemed to believe everything that they told him or that he found out through them, I mean, from them through others. So by September, Mike, of course, had had a street fight with Mitch Blood Green, had crashed his car into a tree, and all this was played up in the media as suicide attempts and self-destructive behavior. Well, what they didn't tell people was that they had convinced Mike he was a manic depressive. Their own diagnosis. And Ruth found a doctor who would give Mike lithium and thorazine without examining him in person. And Mike took these drugs. Ruth Roper, if she was on the other side of the continent, and she found out that Mike had run out of drugs or thrown them away, she would FedEx a new prescription to him. Now, thorazine and lithium are very, very toxic drugs, particularly if they're taken without an examination to determine the exact proportions or amounts are appropriate for you, given your metabolism and your body weight. And Mike was taking these, you know, in an unregulated fashion. And that's why he had the car crash, because he was doped up on these drugs. Wasn't suicide.
What everyone forgets is what happened was they came out and they said that Mike, you know, is a manic depressive and he's got to take this lithium. I came out and I forget, I don't know which one it was, where I said, this is not right. They're wrong. Whatever I said, you know. And when that happened, so you had me, and if you got me, then someone else got to have me, and someone else got to have me. You know what I'm saying? That's how it is in the media industry. And then, so what happened was I started doing all these different shows. On Geraldo Rivera, people are talking, something else, and just defending my fighter, just continually defending my fighter and saying that they were wrong. And then it came out that they were wrong. And that's what, and that's what led to the Dave Sims show. And then I heard that Mike was dating Robin again. Now I hear that he wasn't dating her, that he was going after her or something or other. So, I mean, who knows? I was just, I was trying to walk a very fine line there.
I told him that I would get the best psychiatrist I could. I got one the very next day. Dr. Abraham Halpern, one of the most celebrated, highly regarded psychiatrists in the world, gave up his whole schedule, canceled it all at my request, because I told him it was an emergency, that Mike was taking lithium. He should not be taking it. Please come in. And he came in, and he examined Mike, and Mike was not a manic depressive.
Contrary to the beliefs of Monteith, Caton claims that Tyson never had a problem with women.
The idea of Mike Tyson at that time pinching women's asses and all was something that he would never have, we wouldn't have tolerated. Jim and I would not have tolerated when Mike did anything that was not completely, even if he did not handle himself well in an interview, we would speak to him about it. And Mike was a very different person than he became under the control of Don King. Don King took all of the good features that had been instilled in Mike and put his own.
He doesn't have a problem with women. I mean, that's more media creation than anything. You have to remember, Mike came, he was 13 years old. So, he basically grew up, around Cuss. And I remember he had his first girlfriend, Angie, a local girl. And, Mike liked girls. And Mike always was very respectful around women, older women, young kids. He never had any of these problems, that are been portrayed in the media. I mean, most of it is garbage.
The Tyson trial came with as much publicity as that of William Kennedy Smith. After he was found innocent, there was plenty of optimism that Tyson would get off. After all, he had plenty of money at his disposal and one of the best defense lawyers money could buy. But money couldn't save Mike Tyson on that day.
In the early days, Mike had a lot of swagger. He was confident. He felt this is something he could beat. I'm sure he's being told by Don King and John Horn and Roy Holloway, his camp, that don't worry, this big lawyer, Vince Fuller, is going to solve this problem for you. These are things that Mike has always been told his whole life. People are going to solve his problems. And so for the first week or so, I think he realized that, you know, this is, I'm going to be acquitted. And he got more and more confident. The turning point was when Mike had to take the stand himself. Because his lawyers realized that the case against him was so compelling that, and the testimony of the girl, Desiree Washington, and her mother and the other witnesses so convincing to the jury. The jury wanted to hear Mike speak for himself.
About midway through the trial, people started to question the defense prepared by Vince Fuller, the brilliant defense attorney for Tyson, and the criticisms were not without merit.
As I sat there watching it, at first I gave them the benefit of the doubt that maybe there was some kind of secret strategy here that the great Vince Fuller could pull off. And then I realized that there wasn't, that they were winging it, or that the strategy was going to fail dismally. And their strategy was this. If they could portray Tyson in the most negative possible terms, then they could make the jury believe, perhaps, that if you can see that, and all the other girls at the pageant could see that, Desiree Washington could as well, and therefore she would know what she was getting into and going to his room, and going to his room implied consent, and therefore there was no rape, it was consensual sex. Well, that backfired because the message that the jury got in the end was, everyone can see Mike Tyson is a rapist. Why can't Desiree Washington? She must have known she was going to be raped. And if she knew she was going to be raped, she shouldn't have gone up there. Well, that's ridiculous. And what the prosecution did was manage to take that portrayal of Tyson and that kind of perverse logic and appeal to the jury's common sense, let alone their values, their community values, which are very conservative. And the jury, therefore, decided that they don't like this guy. He's blasphemous towards his religion. He lies to his minister. He carries around $30,000 in his pocket. And this is almost a Rust Belt part of the country we're talking about, where people don't have money. People are losing jobs. So the jury's listening to this and thinking, my God, this guy's an animal.
Towards the end of the trial, the optimism that everyone felt in the Tyson camp had all but dissipated, and the jury was ready to give their verdict.
He walked in alone with Roy Holloway and John Horn and King sitting in the seats, in the spectator seats. His defense attorneys were not with him, nor were the prosecution attorneys in there. They came in about 4 or 5 minutes later, but in that period of time, Mike sat alone. And he must have felt like he was more alone then than any other time in his entire life, sitting in judgment by himself for his whole life, really. Then the jury came in, and my vantage point was right down the lane where the jury sat, and they did not look at him when they came in. And that means that he was guilty, because they are too whatever to look him in the eye with their decision. I turned to a man beside me who worked for the judge. It was a security official, and I said, he's guilty, isn't he? And the man nodded. Jury comes in, sits down, gives the foreman gives the note of their verdict to the judge. Judge reads it, guilty, 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 each count. Tyson was breathing so hard in the center of his chest, his tie was literally rising up and down. When she read the verdict, I think he was in a total state of shock and disbelief. I think he'd been told the whole time by his lawyers and his camp that they would beat this rap. After all, he'd beaten every other rap up until that date. All his fixers had solved his problems.
Now that Mike Tyson is out of the heavyweight picture, boxing will surely go on. It continued after the loss of Muhammad Ali, and it will go on without Mike Tyson. But can Mike Tyson reform his ways and control his anger to live in this society that once embraced him? And if so, will stepping back into the ring bring back the violence that ruined his brilliant ring career in the first place?
The guilty verdict was a heavy blow to accept for all fans of Mike Tyson, but the decision may have been just what Mike Tyson needed to stop his life from continuing on its crash course.
I think what this has done for Mike emotionally is sort of sent him back to the first act of his life in many ways, which he's always been stuck in anyway, I think, of the little boy, posturing and, you know, looking for an out, and, you know, he hasn't faced himself yet, and he won't until he goes to jail. And I think he has to go to jail if for no other reason than to deal with this problem he has, get it under control, find, finished, come out, be a new man, hopefully. And if his career is over because he's in jail too long, that's fine, because it's boxing that's his problem. Boxing and the world dominated for him by Don King and people who are not solving his problems but giving him the toys to exercise his problems. He needs tools to resolve himself. He needs the tools of life to build a good house for himself. And he won't get that until he goes to prison and leaves boxing.
I think a lot depends on what happens to Mike. And I'm talking about Mike behind bars. I think if he still is visited and controlled by the likes of a John Horn and a Rory and a Don King, I think that even if he manages to get out of prison and fight again, he will not be the fighter he could be. On the other hand, if Mike should make his mind up to get rid of King, rid of him, lock, stock, and barrel, and go back to Kevin Rooney, actually, I believe that Mike could actually come back and be almost as good a fighter as he was, because 3 years, maybe a little more than 3 years of enforced retirement will have less adverse effect on a fighter of Tyson's skills than they did on Muhammad Ali.
I would think that if I'm him, you know, I'm reevaluating everything and trying to figure out, you know, where I screwed up. And hopefully when he gets out, he'll come back to this gym and look me up. And if he does that, then he'd have a good chance of regaining the heavyweight title. But then again, you don't know if he's going to do the whole 6 years, if he's going to get killed in prison, if he's going to kill somebody, try to escape. I mean, you just don't, you know, I worked in prison for 3 years in a little medium A over here in Kasaki. And it's, you know, prison life is not nice, you know. It's not. No one wants to be locked up. But if you have to set your mind and you know, accept it. If Mike does that, he'll be all right, and he should do that, because if he doesn't do that, it's just going to be hard. He can make it easier.
Nobody knows what kind of Mike Tyson will return to society after he's released from jail. But one thing is for sure. The question of whether he will fight again will loom over his head every day he spends in prison.
He will, because there'll be Don King or someone who will be offering him a lot of money to fight. And because the name Mike Tyson will never be forgotten in this culture, never. It will always be resuscitated somehow. And the first stage of that will be getting out the last ounces of his blood on the canvas in the last years of his adult life in which he's capable of fighting in any kind of a respectable fashion. And so even if he comes out, he's 25 now, 26 in June. If he goes away for 3 or 4 years, at 30, he'll probably be, you know, bled on the canvas for at least 5 more years, until he's 35.
After all that has occurred, can Mike Tyson come back to society and live peacefully?
I've never failed to believe that there is a part of his humanity, although stifled, although perverted, although hidden, it's always been there. And it's just a faith that in him, and that it's there. He's not an animal, he's a human being. And for Mike, if he can get away from boxing, if he can get away from the people who dominate the heavyweight division, then it's possible he can find that humanity. Even if he comes out at 30 and boxes ignobly for another 5 years until it's finally over and he's got brain damage or whatever, he'll have at least half of his life to get it in order, and I believe he can.
Only Mike himself can be the judge on whether he's learned a lesson from his ordeal, but many experts feel he still hasn't learned that what he did was wrong.
I don't think he has. He won't learn until he goes to jail. What's happening now is that Don King is dancing a mile a minute, speaking as fast as he can, giving him 100 reasons why they're going to beat this on appeal. And John Horn and Roy Holloway are saying the same thing. Well, they go off and spend, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of Mike's money. And Don figures out if he's going to pay Mike or not for the $15 million he owes him from the last 2 fights against Razor Ruddock. So they're speaking out of one side of their mouths to enforce Mike's denial about the whole thing, about his problem with women, and of the other, taking Mike's money. I'm convinced of that, or at least spending his money very willfully. Mike's got to get away from these people. He's got to get in prison, in counseling. He's got to totally change his life. It's the end of the dream. It's the end of the script. Over, finished. The thing that Cuss started has got to end. And Mike has got to write his own script for his own life now.
A question of a few seconds.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
They're forgetting that the 3 knockdown rule is in effect. This fight is over.
Well, Stewart said that Tyson was a mountain he had to climb.
You gotta go to work. Keep jabbing. Keep jabbing, go to work. You're doing it when you're jabbing, right, Mildred? Look, boom, boom, right in.
The shot that will finish things in.
Oh, the uppercut.
What an uppercut by Douglas. Down goes Tyson.
Only time will tell if Mike Tyson can become the good human being that many people thought he could. Larry Holmes, the newest comeback contender, once said that Mike Tyson would either die or go to jail in 5 years. Jail seems to be the answer, and may give him the time he needs to realize his mistakes and try to correct them. For Mike Tyson, Fallen Warrior, I'm Jay Nickerson.